This episode of Come to Therapy with Me is possible thanks to Pediasure, the health shake that helps your fussy eater improve their appetite in 4 weeks. I'll tell you more shortly, but please remember that Pediasure is food for special medical purposes, and use Pediasure only under medical supervision.
Nine podcasts.
Hey, Nicolina here. Oh, that little guy? That's my boy Noah. Yep, that's also him. He may be the light of my life right now, but that didn't stop the postnatal depression. Now I'm pregnant with my second, and to be honest, I need help. So I'm turning to therapy to deal with all the anxiety, the worries and the blues that come along with the most important role of my life, motherhood. Sit with me each week as I try to figure out how I can navigate these rough seas. Keep in mind this is general advice only. This podcast is not intended as a substitute for medical advice and should not be relied on to manage or diagnose a medical condition. You know, I didn't want to hold him for hours on end, and other people wanted to hold their babies. And so does that make me selfish or weird or less of a mum? I've never really admitted this to anyone before. Well, until today. But I've always felt like a bit of an outcast mum. That motherly instinct that everybody talks about. Yeah, even now with Noah nearly a year and a half old, I don't think I ever fully developed that. Most mums can't bear to hear their baby cry, whereas I can be pretty ruthless with the discipline side of parenting. Most mums also tend to put their baby first, whereas I can be a little more on the selfish side. Not having the same instincts and feelings that most mums do, I always ask myself the same daunting question. A question I really hope Charisse can help me answer in today's session. I think a lot about the question of whether I'm supposed to be a mum.
Yes.
Like, I'm a big planner. I'm very, organised. Like a clean, organised, well-planned person.
Ordered.
Hate being late, that sort of thing. And so with that type of personality, like, I very much kind of organised to get pregnant.
Got it. In terms of, well, you wanted to fall pregnant, but also it kind of fit into life's plan
Very
in a particular
much.
way at this point in time.
Yeah, and that's kind of when it all started. Like, I even remember doing like a pros and cons list of whether I should get, it just sounds so weird, but for me, that's just how I make a lot of decisions.
That's how you make your logical decisions.
Yeah, and so I made a pros and cons list of, it was something to do with timing, and I had like a holiday booked, but then COVID hit, and I thought, well, if I'm not going to go on a holiday, maybe I could do this instead. And it very much ended up being, like, I didn't go away, so I had a baby. And prefacing that with, obviously super grateful that I could fall pregnant.
Absolutely, because it doesn't always happen in that, even though we plan for it. Yes, it's out of our hands.
So even from that beginning of, like, not even having kids, but just thinking about kids, I've always felt like, I don't know if I maybe thought about it enough as what it
would actually be like. Yeah, what just popped into my mind is I wonder if what happened, there was this, almost this kind of intellectual thinking about planning for, this is when it will work, and this is maybe what I think it will look like or where it will slot in, which is very different to that frame that really considers, so what will this actually be like in practice? Which is a very tricky frame actually to think about before we've had any exposure to that space. So you went in, you planned to get pregnant, you were lucky enough to fall pregnant.
Yes, which was
then what happened?
Very lucky. Even then, when I was pregnant, I was pregnant, but I wasn't in any way like becoming more maternal, I felt. I was just the same person, but I was just pregnant.
Growing a baby.
Yeah, and I was lucky because I didn't have any symptoms and stuff, so any bad symptoms. So I just kind of cruised through that and very much was still super focused on myself, like working hard, ticking all these boxes for myself. So then I felt like that flows into the second reason I don't feel like I'm very motherly or have that like very strong instinct is when Noah was born, I didn't have like that really immediate connection with him.
was a bit more of a shock, right?
Yeah, it wasn't like in the movies, you know? I gave birth, I was exhausted, and then it was just, how do I explain it? Like, I was obsessed with him, but I wasn't, I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, this is like the greatest moment of my life.
Yes. And I think this is the tricky thing, right? We have this idea that just because we have a baby, we all of a sudden feel like a mother.
Yeah.
And we often reflect on, well, when does a woman become a mother? Is it at the time of conception? Is it before conception? Is it at the time of birth? Or does it actually sometimes take time? Yes, we're a mother, we've given birth, but when does that feel, when do all those feelings start coming online?
Yeah, I felt like the same person, but I just had a child.
A baby with you.
Yeah.
It kind of reorganises a lot of your thinking then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because you've gone from being this super organised, in control, planned, ordered individual to having a baby, and that's all gone to plan, tick, 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 as in your case. But all of a sudden I have this whole different set of feelings that are now coming up. Well, what does this whole motherhood space look like? And why do I not particularly feel so maternal?
Yeah.
So what did you do with that, with those, because they're big feelings?
Yeah, and I think what happened was because of the type of person I am, and also that I just felt like very lost at the time, completely lost.
Yeah.
I very much went into like trying to organise Noah into my life. As just a simple example is sleep training him.
Right, yep.
So from the get-go, I was like, well, you know, I need a properly sleep-trained baby, and I just got on it straight away.
Right.
And everyone has their own opinion about sleep training, but like, you know, and you leave them to cry, like, and then I'd be like, you know, I'd feel selfish that I am leaving him to cry, but then I'd feel like, well, this is my life too, and I need him to sleep. And so that was a really hard balance at the start of, should I want to be holding you all the time? Should I want to be loving you and nurturing you and enjoying this time?
But I want my own space as well. I think what you're talking about, there are so many points of conflict, and you're having to navigate through all these points of conflict and being pulled in multiple directions with really very little framework to lean into. And that can leave you feeling overwhelmed. And I wonder if that was kind of spiralling and spinning for you in those early days.
Yeah. It's overwhelming, and also I felt like just always that question of, am I really meant to be a mum if I'm not giving him that 100% of like nurturing and making sure he's getting everything that he needs. Obviously, practically, I felt like I was doing that. I was feeding him and obviously letting him sleep and stuff. But, you know, I didn't want to hold him for hours on end, and other people wanted to hold their babies. And so does that make me selfish or weird or less of a mum?
This is where it becomes quite tricky, is when we lean into that comparison as well. Because I think the reality is every mother or every woman is going to experience motherhood in their own unique way. And no way is more right than the other or more wrong than the other, but it's really about figuring out your pathway, which is, granted, very hard to do when we're sleep deprived and it's all very new and we're hormonal, but really creating space to figure out, and what type of a mum do I want to be? What type of a mum did I fantasize about being? How did I kind of imagine this to be whilst I was pregnant? What did I imagine my baby to be like? And then updating that with, and what does it look like in reality?
Yeah. Which is very different. Very different.
Very different. It was very different for you, right?
It felt very different. Now that I'm expecting my second, and, you know, it's weird because I then say, well, why did I get pregnant with a second child? Like, you know, what's wrong with me? But I tried to really obviously think about the second child and like whether I wanted a second child and whether I was just having one because that was the logical thing to do next. I come from a big family, so it's a lot of when's number two coming along, don't wait too long. And I feel selfish even saying it, but my reasons for having a second child were very practical. I'm a sibling myself and I really enjoyed that. I didn't want Noah to be an only child. I wanted him to be close in age to his siblings because I really appreciated that friendship I had with mine. So then, because there's such practical reasons, I get like nervous when people say, you know, are you so excited about baby number two? Like, yeah, of course I'm excited about the baby, but also I feel like I am also just ticking a box that I have.
For you, right?
Yeah.
So I think what you're talking about is we all have different values. We all have different things that are important to us. And those values very much will determine some of the actions we take, right? So yeah, absolutely for you, you're saying, well, my value is having a second baby because of these reasons that you've just listed. And Mary over here might say, well, my value for having another baby is because I just want to be surrounded by kids all the time and I've got so much love to give and whatever. Not saying you don't have so much love to give, right? It's just about what our value is or what's important to us and really giving ourselves permission for that to be okay and for our reasons to be okay for what they are, rather than them having to be, I don't know, this fantasized list of idealized reasons as to why we should have a second.
Yeah, I like hearing that. That makes me feel good because I don't see them as values, whereas that's a good way to look at them. So I always saw them as just me being very, as I said, organised, practical, have my reasons. And I feel like I'm the only one from a lot of people that just is honest about that. As if everybody around me is not also organising their life around having a baby and the reasons they're having them are practical.
Totally. And I think this is it, right? I don't know, maybe society puts pressure on women to present a certain way, and particularly in this motherhood space, I think there's a lot of pressure to put on that mask of motherhood and say the right thing, whereas it's very freeing when we can actually just have very real, open conversations. Exactly like we're having now, which is, well, actually, this is why I'm doing this. It's important to me that life happens in this way, and that's okay, and be okay with it.
Yeah, because it feels like slightly shameful to admit sometimes.
It does, doesn't it? That this is who you are and this is what you're thinking.
Yeah, and that's how I feel, and that's just my honest opinion, and that's like as if I have to hide it and I have to be, I just can't wait to have another baby, and like I want a million babies around me. I don't. I don't want a million babies around me, and I know that it's like hard and crazy.
But somehow you feel pressure to present in that way. And then what happens is when we're presenting in a way that's not true to us, it's incongruent, right? And that's exhausting, because then we can see how that then builds we have this whole narrative that we're presenting externally about wanting this and feeling this particular way. But we're fully aware that we don't link in with that narrative. So then we have this really messy kind of bubbling pot of guilt and shame, and I really don't feel connected to that. So I think the antidote is just owning it for what it is.
Yeah.
This session is lifting a massive weight off my shoulders. I'm not a bad mum like I thought I was, which is great news. So much more to touch on in just a second. All parents want to know their child has a balanced diet, but it can be extra challenging with a fussy eater. That's where Pediasure may help. It's a health shake for fussy eater kids and helps improve appetite in 4 weeks. Your child will love the vanilla, strawberry and chocolate flavours, and there are more serving ideas in the free recipe book at pediasure.com.au. Remember that Pediasure is food for special medical purposes and use only under medical supervision. Buy in quality pharmacies.
And coming back to what you were talking about before, which is, I had all these pulls to look after Noah and whatever, but I also had a pull to look after myself and create space, and I can't be with you 100% of the time. And what we generally talk about in that space is this idea of good enough mothering.
Yeah.
So being good enough. And I wonder what that felt like for you with Noah, if that idea was even in your head about good enough mothering, or if it was this idealised, things have to be perfect and done a certain way.
Well, I feel like I always questioned myself. It was always like an up and down of, am I doing enough? Literally, am I a good enough mum? Which would then go into the second question of, am I meant to be a mum? And how do you even answer that? Like,
what is the answer?
Is there an answer to, are you meant to be a mum? And is there a process to think about that properly that I maybe didn't do, that I maybe didn't sit down with myself before making that decision? Because now I look at people, who around me who have chosen not to have children.
Yep.
And I think, wow, like they really put a lot of thought into that.
There was a lot of conscious thinking.
Yeah, and I don't think that I thought about it at all.
it almost happened for you as a matter of this was just something that you always thought was going to happen in your landscape.
It was literally, I got married, went on this big honeymoon, kids was going to be next, so let's just have a kid. And then I thought once I had Noah, I was like, oh, wait, should I have thought about this?
I wonder if what you're saying is, was there a knowing that you should have thought about it more, or it's only now when you reflect back and you reflect on thinking, oh, should I have thought about this in a different way because of what my experience was like?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's definitely the latter. It's now reflecting back. And when I ask myself that as a general question, I love being a mum and I don't at all regret having Noah and am excited for a second baby. But I maybe think, did I do it at the right time at least? Or did I really... I organised it into the schedule that year, but was it something I could have done a little later that maybe I would have been, more mentally mature or whatever it may have been to avoid the trauma that happened when I had him.
And I think that's really tricky, right? Like, it's really tricky to answer that because I would say we only know what we know at any point in time. And if we're not also surrounded by people who are prompting different reflections, we kind of have to wonder, well, how was that stuff meant to come online? Which is really tricky because we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And we know it now because of what you've been through. It's hindsight. I mean.
If I could only speak to my 2019 self, I would have so much to say.
Yes. I mean, what we do know is when we go through a pregnancy, there is very much a psychological development or change in psyche and thinking. So there are different things that we, from a psychological perspective, as a psychologist, that we like to see coming online for our mums to be during pregnancy. But again, that's really tricky to know what those bits are because it's just not spoken about.
Yeah.
So some of those things would be, like, you did all that practical work thinking about the practicalities of becoming a mum. I suppose the flip of that coin is thinking about more of the emotional side of it. What does it mean to have a baby? How is my role in life about to change? What does it mean to care for another person? Kind of put their needs and where do my needs fit? How am I going to just maintain the juggle and the balance and the change of what my landscape is and the change of my relationships with my partner? This is all, I mean, in an ideal world, we would all be doing this work during our pregnancies, but very hard to know this stuff when you don't know it.
Yeah. I think they're really handy questions because even now as you say them, I think about them now being pregnant with number 2. Going back to as well, like the comparison thing to other mums makes me always feel like a bad mum.
Does it?
Yeah, because even as an example in my mother's group.
Right, yes.
So I have a really wonderful mother's group, but at the start, in my head, I just kept telling myself, oh, they're just saying these things just because that's what you're meant to. But in our, big group chat, it would be all the mums sharing like photos of their babies and saying even things just like, oh, my baby's really sick and it's just heartbreaking. I don't know how I can help him. And yeah, of course, I don't like when Noah's sick, but I just felt like I didn't have that, like...
Wasn't that same level of
it wasn't that same
despair.
level of, I feel helpless. And I just kind of was like, you're sick, what can I do for him? Again, I'm just a practical person.
Yes.
Yeah, I always compared myself to the emotional connection they had with their babies. As our babies started to hit milestones as well, they felt more excited about it than I was.
Right.
I was, of course, proud of him, when he would roll, that would be exciting. Yes. But it was just this, I felt like they had this obsession with motherhood.
Got it.
And whereas I was a mum, but I'm still, like I have a whole other side of me and all these other roles that I also put focus on. Yeah. So then I asked myself, well, should I be putting more on the mum side? Yes. So instead of, let's say, my week is, mothering is 100% of your week. But let's say, like I work and I'm a mum and I also spend time with my husband and I always try and see my friends. It was like, well, maybe I should stop doing friends and husband time and put more into mum time.
Because in your mind, you were somehow marrying together the more focused I am on my baby, or the more I'm expressing how focused I am on my baby, the more that equals being a good mum.
Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah.
And when we sit here now, do we look at that and go, well, is that actually accurate?
It sounds funny when you say it out loud like that.
Yeah.
It does.
But isn't that interesting that that's where your mind that's where it got consumed into? I think we all judge motherhood in different ways, right? Give me one mum who does not feel guilty or feels like they're not doing a good enough job in some domain.
Yeah.
I think every mum struggles in some way in this space. However, I think it's up to each individual to really think about, well, what does motherhood mean to me? For me, in my unique family unit, and for me as my unique individual, what does it look like? And where do I need to start giving myself permission and shining in the way that I do as a mum?
Yeah.
Not because other women in my mother's group shine in a different way. And that means I need to shine in exactly that same way.
Yeah.
Were there moments, there were lots of moments where there was a lot of self-doubt, a lot of self-judgment, a lot of questioning. Were there any moments where you were able to kind of highlight those moments where you could shine, or those ways that you did shine as a mum with Noah?
I like to take pride in like his personality because I feel like he's a very social child. He's so bubbly, so fun, so friendly. He's very social, and I think that's a big part of that is because I made a real conscious effort for him to fit into my life rather than me fit into his life.
Right.
And the way I did that was, for example, I love to be out and about, so I made sure that he was coming with me.
Okay.
And whereas, you know, other mums I felt were staying at home and paying a lot of attention to like playing a lot with their children at home one-on-one.
Right.
For me, I knew that wasn't me as a mum. I don't want to sit at home with my child and play with him all day. I want to go out, make sure he's comfortable going out with me, see friends, see family.
Yeah.
I do. I'm pretty proud of that because I think that he's a great kid because of that. He's such a social child. He fits really well with other people. He
Beautiful.
Isn't at all attached to me like by the hip.
Yes.
It's a weird thing to be proud of, but for me, I mean, I'm happy to admit that.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm happy to admit that I don't mind that he doesn't need me all the time.
And there we go, right? There we go where we, for what you have just described, we say, and this is how I mother. And these are, again, values. This is what was important to me. And this is what worked for me in that motherhood space, and maybe what continues to work in this motherhood space. But really taking ownership. I think we keep circling back to that, right?
Yeah.
There is no one pathway through which we all journey through motherhood. Thank goodness, because it would be a little bit boring if we all journeyed in the same way. We all bring different frameworks of relationship into our dynamic with our babies. We can't judge anyone for what dynamic they bring in because we're all unique, and we all pave our own pathway through motherhood. And your values are your values, not someone else's values. What you are able to do is you're really able to identify, well, right now, what's important to you and where you kick your goals.
Yeah.
And likewise, we can also kind of identify, how do I want to do things differently this time? Where did I not feel like I was super shiny and sparkly?
Yeah.
And what do I want to do differently, and what does that look like in practice?
It feels really nice to like also own that because I feel like previous to what I've just said, I would also see it as, why doesn't Noah always want to be around me? Maybe he does, like, maybe I'm not a good mum. Maybe he doesn't love me as much as these kids love their mums.
Yeah.
But that feels really good to be able to say, well, no, actually, I'm proud that he's his own little child, and I feel like, yeah, I contributed to that, and it's quite a benefit for a mum that, you know, you don't have a toddler hanging on to you 24/7.
Well, you can see confidence in him.
Yeah.
And nice that you can link that back to, this is something about our motherhood journey together.
I feel like I gave that to him, which is nice.
Yes.
I need to do that more because I automatically, my brain goes to what I'm not doing
100%.
rather than what I am doing and what I am doing right and what I am doing for me and whatever works for us.
And then maybe this is something to bring into this current pregnancy moving forward. Okay, I know I normally go to the negative and the stuff that I think is lacking, but I'm going to really pay attention to what I am bringing into this space, what I am proud of, what is important to me.
And I'd like to think I'm a cool mum, you know? Like I'm a cool mum and he gets a lot of great qualities from me. So I'm proud of that as well.
Yeah, well done.
So the takeaway is that I've got to give myself more pats on the back. I am a good mum. In fact, why not a great mum? And definitely a really cool mum. I stand by that. Thanks for sitting alongside me this week. See you at the next session. Come to Therapy with Me is hosted by me, Nicolina. And if you ever want to connect, find me on Instagram at HeyNicolinaK. My wonderful therapist is Dr. Charisse. This is a 9 Podcasts original production. In the next episode of Come to Therapy with Me,
I feel like I don't even know whose body this is at this point.
You've not existed in this body before.
No. I'm nervous about, I don't feel sexy now. I've got a couple months left.
Yes.
Then I've got to have a newborn. So I'm not, when am I going to get to the gym? So when am I going to ever feel
sexy again
ever.
Or feel like, and maybe it's not even just feeling sexy, it's about when will I feel like myself again?
finding a therapist that's right for you can take a little time. But when it comes to ensuring your fussy eater is eating right, Pediasure health shakes may make the whole process easier. Pediasure contains 28 essential vitamins and minerals, including iron and zinc, that help to support a healthy appetite in 4 weeks. You can download a recipe book with ideas for the school lunchbox and also read product info at pediasure.com.au. Pediasure is food for special medical purposes and is available at quality pharmacies. Use only under medical supervision.